I bought my lake cabin because I wanted distance from people and rules. My daily life was already full of schedules, deadlines, and stress. When I finally had the chance to buy property, I wanted something simple and private. No shared spaces. No committees. No strangers telling me what I could or could not do. The cabin sat next to a quiet lake surrounded by trees. The water was clean and calm. There were no public paths leading to it. The shoreline was natural and untouched. When I bought the property, I carefully reviewed every document. The land included the lake bed and full water rights. The lake was not public. It was not shared. It was privately owned and clearly defined on the deed. Before I bought it. The lake and surrounding land belonged to one family for generations. Over time, developers bought nearby plots and built houses. Eventually, those houses formed a small HOA community. However, the lake was never sold. It was never included. There were no easements, no agreements, no shared access. The HOA simply existed nearby. That detail would later become very important. I usually kept the cabin quiet. Sometimes I went alone. Sometimes I invited friends. That weekend, I invited a group of close friends for a short summer getaway. We planned nothing crazy. Just food, swimming, kayaking, and relaxing. We arrived on Friday evening. The weather was perfect. Saturday afternoon was warm with a light breeze. A few friends were kayaking near the dock. Some were floating in the water. Others were sitting on chairs near the shoreline talking and laughing. Music played softly. Everything was calm. That calm ended when I noticed a woman standing near my dock. She appeared suddenly. She was standing stiffly with her arms crossed. She was wearing sunglasses and staring directly at my guests. She did not wave. She did not introduce herself. She just stood there watching. After a moment. She shouted, asking who was responsible for what was happening. I walked toward her calmly and asked if she needed something. Her response was immediate and aggressive. She told me my guests needed to leave the lake immediately. I asked her why. She pointed toward the water and said the lake was community property and that my guests were trespassing. I told her she was mistaken and explained that the lake was private and part of my property. She laughed and said everyone says that. She then told me she was the HOA president and that she had full authority over the lake. She claimed she had lived there for 10 years and knew exactly what belonged to the HOA. I explained again that my property was not part of the HOA. I told her I did not answer to HOA rules. She ignored that completely. She pulled out her phone and said she was issuing a warning. She told me that if my guests did not leave the water immediately, I would be fined $500 per person. She spoke confidently, as if she had done this many times before. I told her fines from an HOA did not belong to, had no meaning. That is when her attitude changed from smug to angry. She raised her voice and said she would call the police. She said she would have everyone removed for trespassing. She said she would have vehicles towed and file official complaints. At that point, I realized reasoning with her was pointless. I told her calmly to go ahead and call the police. She looked surprised. She clearly expected me to panic or give in. Instead, she hesitated and then made the call. While she spoke with the dispatcher, I contacted my lawyer. I explained that an HOA president was attempting to remove guests from my privately owned lake. He immediately told me to gather all documents related to the property and water rights. We waited. My friends were nervous, but stayed calm. I told them everything was fine and to continue enjoying themselves. The woman paced back and forth near the dock, clearly irritated that no one was reacting the way she expected. About 20 minutes later, 2 police officers arrived. The woman rushed toward them immediately and began explaining her version of events. She claimed my guests were illegally occupying HOA property. She accused us of violating community rules and disturbing the peace. She spoke loudly and confidently. Asterisk, the officers listened and then asked her to step back. They turned to me and asked if I owned the property. I said yes. They asked if I had proof. I told them I did. Asterisk, I went inside the cabin and returned with my deed survey maps and water rights documentation. The officers reviewed everything carefully. Asterisk, one officer studied the survey closely. He then asked the woman if she knew the lake was privately owned. She immediately said that was impossible. She insisted the HOA controlled the lake. Asterisk, the officer pointed to the boundary lines on the map and explained that the lake sat entirely within my property. He explained that the HOA boundary ended before the shoreline. There were no easements, no shared access rights. Asterisk, the woman became visibly upset. She raised her voice and said that even if I owned the lake, I could not deny community members access. The officer asked her if she had any legal documents supporting that, claimed she did not. The officer then told her that she was trespassing on private property. She refused to accept that. She argued loudly and accused the officers of being wrong. Asterisk, the officers warned her to leave the property immediately. She refused again. Asterisk, at that point, the officers escorted her away from the dock. She continued arguing as she was walked off the property. My friends watched quietly as the situation ended. Asterisk, once she was gone, the officers apologized for the inconvenience and confirmed that everything was clear. They told me I had every right to use my lake and allow guests. Asterisk, the rest of the weekend was peaceful. My friends relaxed again. We talked about how unbelievable the situation was. A week later, I received a formal letter from the HOA. The letter apologized for the incident, acknowledged that they had no authority over my property or the lake. The letter also informed me that the woman had been removed from her position as HOA president. Asterisk, later, I learned that she had been bullying residents for years. She issued fake warnings and threatened fines without authority. Most people complied out of fear or confusion. This time, she chose the wrong person. Asterisk, I still own the cabin. I still own the lake. I still invite friends every summer. The HOA now avoids my property completely. Asterisk, this experience taught me an important lesson. Never assume someone has authority just because they claim it. Know your rights. Keep your documents. And never let someone intimidate you into giving up what is legally yours. Asterisk.